The death of Count Dooku was the culmination of an operation that, at first glance, appeared to be a success. Anakin Skywalker, impulsive and unstable, gave in to anger and executed the Sith under the calm and enigmatic gaze of Chancellor Palpatine. A few seconds later, however, the unexpected happened. A violent wave of small chain explosions began to shake the corridors of the Separatist ship. "It was a final trap by Dooku," shouted Obi-Wan, who had just regained consciousness, as the floor shook beneath his feet. The detonation was Dooku's last resort in case the plan failed. An explosive sequence that threatened to destroy the entire ship and that even Palpatine himself did not know existed. Amid the chaos, the Jedi rushed to protect the Chancellor, whom they had rescued at the beginning of the mission. Escape pods were hastily activated. Obi-Wan, still stunned, clung to Anakin, and together they were carried away by one of the emergency transports. Palpatine, however, was placed in another pod, separated for reasons of urgency. "This one is ready to go. It's the fastest," shouted a clone pilot, unaware that the navigation system of that capsule was about to be severely damaged by the explosions. Within seconds, the compartments were launched into space, some colliding with debris, others evaporating in the vacuum. Palpatine's capsule was one of those that disappeared into the far reaches of the galaxy, without a trace. The Republic ships supporting the mission suffered from the impact of the destroyer's final explosion. Some were destroyed, others seriously damaged. The mission, which was supposed to be a triumph, ended in tragedy. "We've lost contact with the Chancellor's module," reported an officer. The news spread quickly, plunging the Galactic capital into a state of shock. The Senate, accustomed to being led by Palpatine's iron fist, now had no direction. Senators looked at each other in emergency meetings, seeking culprits and raising suspicions. With the Chancellor's disappearance, an unprecedented political crisis took hold of the Republic. Groups of senators began to form, each with their own interests, distrusting the loyalty of the Jedi and other senators and demanding explanations. Others claimed that the attack had been staged, that the kidnapping was an unsuccessful hoax. The Jedi Council, taken by surprise, tried to maintain order and provide answers to the people. But the instability grew like an infected wound, difficult to contain. The Jedi promised to continue the search for the Chancellor to try to maintain peace. Anakin Skywalker found himself immersed in disturbing visions. The dreams of Padme, who had just told him about her pregnancy, dying during childbirth, disturbed him even more intensely. Without Palpatine to incite his fears and offer false solutions, Anakin sought guidance from Obi-Wan and the Jedi Council. "I need to understand what is happening to me," he confessed to his former master. However, with the Republic in collapse, the Jedi's attention was divided. Yoda and Mace Windu coordinated attempts to investigate Palpatine's whereabouts while trying to prevent the Senate from fragmenting. With the mastermind behind the war gone, the Separatist armies fell into disarray. General Grievous, without Darth Sidious's orders, acted brutally but without clear direction. He attacked planets with excessive force but without strategic objectives. Without Lord Sidious, they were just weapons without purpose. Meanwhile, in the silent corridors of the Jedi Temple, tense discussions were taking place. Some masters saw Palpatine's disappearance as a possible imbalance in the Force. Others feared that he was dead, and with him the fragile stability of the galaxy. Yoda, more reflective, felt that something profound had changed in the flow of the Force, like a rupture that had not yet fully revealed itself. Without a chancellor to lead, several senators tried to impose themselves as provisional authorities. Bail Organa and other representatives sought dialogue, but were blocked by militaristic interests that wanted to establish an emergency government. "If the war continues without a leader, we will destroy ourselves," Bail warned. But no one listened. Allied planets began to rebel, each demanding direct protection, creating independent alliances. The weakened Republic was heading toward its own internal ruin. Amid this chaotic scenario, Anakin grew increasingly frustrated. He felt more and more isolated, even with Obi-Wan trying to support him. "They don't listen to us, Master. The galaxy is falling apart and the Council just meditates," he protested. Obi-Wan, concerned, tried to calm his pupil, but he could see the emotional cracks widening. Still, without Palpatine's manipulative voice, Anakin sought a new path, more unstable, but less corrupt. Time, however, would take a heavy toll for the lack of clear answers. The throne of Coruscant remained empty. The shadows of war deepened without their main author. Meanwhile, lost in the far reaches of space, the man who almost became emperor faced true loneliness for the first time. And the galaxy, unaware, was moving not toward the end of the war, but toward the beginning of something even more uncertain. Palpatine awoke in pain, coughing up the damp, acidic smell of the planet where his capsule had crashed. Mud covered part of his face, and his body ached from the accident during the forced atmospheric entry. The body of the pilot who had taken him there had been almost completely devoured by a strange creature next to the ship, which no longer emitted any kind of energy or activated any systems. All around, a swampy forest exuded suffocating heat and toxic fumes. Black, twisted trees rose like claws frozen in time, and winged creatures with translucent wings and fluorescent eyes flew in circles in absolute silence. "Where am I?" he muttered, his voice hoarse and filled with contempt. The sky was covered by thick fog and clouds that unleashed lightning without warning, as if the planet itself was reacting to his presence. The landscape was hostile. Tree roots crawled across the ground like living snakes, and in every puddle of water there were eyes peering out. From inside a cave emerged a moss-covered creature with tentacles on its back and a triple jaw. Palpatine incinerated it with his lightning with a gesture. "I have no time for primitive aberrations," he said, as the creature's body writhed in flames. But the creatures returned, different, hybrids of reptiles and insects, some flying in flocks as if attracted by the dark energy emanating from the Sith. Still, none were sentient. None responded. None knelt, and that enraged him. "I shaped the galaxy," he shouted, alone, as he walked through the slime. "I manipulated kings and planets, created wars with a snap of my fingers." In his mind, the faces of Naboo, the Senate, Dooku, and Anakin appeared and disappeared like mirages. He remembered every calculated step. The trade blockade, the civil war, the rise of the Republic under fear, the distracted Jedi Council. All built with precision, only to now collapse with a bang. Lose everything because of a technical glitch? No, this is a disgrace. Anger fueled his connection to the dark side. The energy of the Force became suffocating around him, as if the planet was reacting to his fury. Every time a new creature approached, he destroyed it with his saber or crushed it with the Force. Trees fell in flames, animals screamed and fled, but the swamp seemed endless and silent. He found no rescue, no allies, no signs of technology or civilization. No other soul with whom he could negotiate or subdue. "Not even the stupid Jedi dare come here, or even know where I am," he shouted. The days became indistinguishable. Time stretched out. Palpatine began to hear voices, ancient echoes of the Force, cries of the dead, distorted memories. Amid the scorching heat, he saw the face of Darth Plagueis, his former master. "Death? Do you still fear it?" said the vision. Palpatine ignored it, throwing lightning bolts into the mist, but nothing stopped the whispers. The forest seemed to whisper lies and fears. "I am the Empire. I am the destiny of the galaxy," he muttered, trying to convince himself. But the truth was simple and cruel. He was alone. Meanwhile, the Republic's Senate, in desperation, turned its attention completely to the fighting. "Forget the Chancellor. We need victory," Bail said in one of the tumultuous sessions. The search for Palpatine was officially scaled back. The fleet was redeployed to contain growing conflict zones, and a few reconnaissance pods traveled randomly, searching across the planets. With no further evidence of a conspiracy behind the kidnapping, the Jedi returned to the front lines. Anakin Skywalker had just learned that he was going to be a father, which both delighted and worried him, but he couldn't stop. Despite worrying about the Chancellor's whereabouts, he led offensives against separatist bases in the outer systems. "We need to end this war," No matter the cost, he told Obi-Wan, who remained by his side as mentor and commander. However, Anakin felt empty. The dreams about Padme continued, and he no longer had Palpatine to confide in. "They treat me like a warrior, but not like a man with fears," he confided to R2-D2 one night. Even with Palpatine's absence, the dark side continued to pulsate throughout the galaxy. The pain, fear, and hatred generated by the war were fuel enough. The Jedi Council realized this, but they also realized that the pattern of separatist attacks had changed greatly after Dooku was killed and Palpatine was lost in space. The Jedi were overwhelmed, fighting on multiple fronts, trying to prevent the Republic from fragmenting further. But for every planet conquered, 2 new ones entered into conflict. Meanwhile, over the months, the swampy jungle had ceased to be a novelty. Palpatine knew every sound in the forest, every hunting pattern of the creatures, every cycle of fog and storm. He learned which creatures and plants he could eat and how to make shelter. He wandered in circles, hoping that something would change, that a transport would appear, that a transmission would be heard, or anything. But nothing came. Instead, silence enveloped him like a veil of punishment. He began to feel the weight of a purposeless existence. Perhaps this is what remains of the forgotten gods. Abandonment, he muttered, his gaze lost in the roots and black leaves. There were days when he would simply sit on the cold mud, staring into nothingness and thinking about the promises of unlimited power. The power still burned in his bones, but without direction, without a stage, without an audience. It was just an ember in the dark. "I created empires, and now I feed on worms." He knew he was going mad. The creatures of the swamp began to seem familiar, almost like companions. Sometimes he spoke to them as if they were senators or generals. The Senate, they were just cattle, and I was the whip. But each time he repeated this, the conviction sounded emptier. Pride did not sustain the soul. It only distracted it. Then he heard a different sound. A low, steady hum coming from the east, between mountains he had never dared to climb. The force seemed to vibrate there in a unique way, both chaotic and concentrated, but grave and powerful, like a beating heart. Driven more by desperation than curiosity, Palpatine made his way there. Took days. During the journey, the winds cut like blades, and the birds flew in silence, accompanying him. When he finally found the crack in the rock, he knew immediately. This was not just a cave. It was a sanctuary of the Force. Neutral, wild, unchanging. Inside the cave, time disappeared. The walls seemed to move, to breathe. And then the visions came. Palpatine saw himself sitting on a golden throne, wearing a crown of bones, burning planets with mere thoughts. But in an instant, it was Anakin who appeared, younger, confident, wielding a blue lightsaber and plunging it into his chest. "You fell because of pride," said the young Skywalker. In another vision, he was betrayed by his own clones, killed as a frail and irrelevant old man. The images followed one after another. Jedi children begging for mercy, senators manipulated like pawns, Padme screaming as everything around her collapsed. The Force did not lie. It only showed him what he always wanted to see, but now it seemed somewhat empty. The true face of absolute power was not glory, it was ruin. In the center of the cave, he saw himself as a child, with frightened eyes, surrounded by darkness and light at the same time. "You chose the abyss, but the abyss also chose you," whispered a voice that was not his own. Leaving the cave days later, Palpatine was different. The hatred had not disappeared, but it had been transfigured. He no longer burned with rage. He was silent. He began to wander with calmer steps, observing the planet with different eyes. He no longer sought to destroy every creature that appeared. Sometimes he let them pass. He began to reflect on his actions not as mistakes, but as choices made by a man who could only see half of the whole. The Force is indivisible. I denied the half that would complete me. Palpatine studied the planet and himself. He created his own rituals, meditated deeply, and sought to understand both sides of the Force, not as enemies, but as aspects of a single energy. He did not become a Jedi. He would never accept the dogma of the Order, nor the denial of emotions. But he no longer saw himself as a Sith either. The ambition of the Sith no longer filled his heart. Still, war raged on in the galaxy. One of the most brutal attacks by the Separatists took place on a planet devastated by ages of mining and magnetic storms. It was there that Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi were sent, with the goal of eliminating the unstable cyborg leader once and for all. As they descended onto the planet's stormy surface, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and a few clone squads were greeted by black dust storms and flames that cut through the sky. The Separatist defenses were automatic and relentless, but Skywalker advanced with unusual fury. His maneuvers were powerful but erratic, as if anger guided him more than the Force. It was as if he could never focus. His mind was always on Padme, who was now almost 9 months pregnant, and on the memories of dreams that brought death. "You need to focus, Anakin," Obi-Wan warned. "We can't win if you're fighting your own feelings too." Skywalker just nodded, his eyes half closed, immersed in an internal conflict that only grew. After taking down the communication towers and invading the main bunker, the final confrontation began. Grievous appeared engulfed in flames, opening his 4 arms and activating 4 lightsabers that spun like propellers. "Miserable Jedi, you came to finish what you started, but today, I'm the one who will finish you." The combat was brutal. Skywalker looked like a cornered animal, jumping, screaming, blows coming from all sides. Grievous realized that the young man was on the verge of collapse. Obi-Wan did too. "You're giving in, Anakin. Control yourself," shouted his master. At a critical moment, Grievous knocked Skywalker down, stepping on his chest with one of his metal legs. With a well-aimed blow, he threw Obi-Wan against a steel wall. "Goodbye, Chosen One," hissed the general, preparing the final blow. But Anakin, driven by an uncontrollable force, pulled out 2 lightsabers that Grievous was carrying and activated them in a cross. With a cry of rage, he pierced the general's torso, cutting him in half. Sparks flew, pieces fell, and the red glow of the cyborg's eyes began to fade. It was the end. With his circuits burning and his organs beginning to be consumed by flames, Grievous used his last seconds of life to spit out a shocking truth. "You think you've won?" Was just the blade. The mind behind it all is Palpatine. The name fell like an explosion in the minds of the Jedi. "He will return one day and you will pay," Grievous finished. Anakin knelt, sabers still in hand, his gaze lost. "He lied. He just wanted to destabilize me." Obi-Wan, panting, stared at the general's broken body. "Or he told the truth. We had long had doubts about the Chancellor. But this," the silence between them was heavy. Grievous' revelation had deeply affected both of them. It was information impossible to ignore, but difficult to believe. Loyalty to the Republic and trust in Palpatine had been pillars for years. What kind of world were they now uncovering? When they returned to the Republic cruiser to send their report to the Jedi Council, they were surprised by unexpected news. One of the long-range probes, sent months ago to search for signs of Palpatine, had received a response. The Chancellor had been located on a distant planet. With his position confirmed, rescue forces were immediately dispatched. But in the silence of the ship, Obi-Wan muttered, "What if Grievous was right?" Days later, the rescue ship glided silently through the atmosphere of Coruscant, breaking through the heavy clouds that covered the city planet. When the ramp opened, the spotlights from the official platforms illuminated the central figure descending calmly. Palpatine, wrapped in worn robes, a full beard, and a serene expression. Politicians, senators, and media figures crowded around, eager to witness the return of the man who had disappeared months ago. Senator Organa was the first to approach, with a smile that was both courteous and judgmental. "Chancellor Palpatine, you are indeed alive. On behalf of the Senate, I welcome you back." He bowed his head in respect. "I am no longer Chancellor, my dear friend, but I thank you for your welcome." As he was led into the Senate, perplexed faces exchanged glances. Palpatine was too calm. No signs of trauma, no disturbance whatsoever. Bail Organa commented quietly to another senator. He seems more lucid than when he was in power. Palpatine stopped from time to greet someone, as if he had returned from a spiritual retreat rather than a wild and uninhabited planet. Still, none of those present dared to voice their suspicion, for his presence was still powerful. At the end of that day, all channels across the galaxy were taken over by an unexpected broadcast. Palpatine's image appeared, serene and resolute, while citizens and senators watched in silence. Citizens of the Republic, I am alive. I am deeply grateful for all the gifts celebrating my return and for all the searches for me. I was lost, but I found something greater than myself. The Force touched me and redeemed me. I come to speak the truth. The dramatic pause brought tension to their hearts. I was the architect of the war. I manipulated the Senate, created chaos, and fueled conflict between brothers. All in the name of a power I did not understand. All the politicians and civilians were shocked to hear those words. The revelation continued, with Palpatine's voice echoing through the planetary systems. I no longer wish to reign. I no longer wish to command armies or senators. But neither will I surrender. I will not submit to trials or imprisonment. What I did, and now I just want to watch as an impartial observer. Let the universe judge for itself. His image slowly faded, leaving an uncomfortable silence in the air. Many were shocked by the public confession, while others felt a chill of anticipation. Was it true, or just another strategic move? In the Senate, chaos ensued immediately. Some senators demanded his arrest, while others called for calm to understand the new situation. At the Jedi Temple, the Masters gathered again to discuss the former Chancellor's statement. Mace Windu was the first to speak, his voice laden with firmness. We cannot let him go free. We will arrest him right now. Yoda, always thoughtful, replied calmly. If we try to arrest him, conflict we will bring. The risk of provoking another war hung like a shadow over the order. Obi-Wan, observing Anakin's behavior, added a cautious reflection. Maybe that's what he wants. A new war, but entirely in his name. But maybe he really has changed. Silence fell for a few moments until Anakin, with a heavy look, stepped forward. Here among us, I am the one who connected most with Palpatine, but before he died, General Grievous told us something. He said that Palpatine was more than a traitor, he was the last Sith. The other Masters turned to him with attention, but it was Obi-Wan who continued. Grievous said he was the catalyst for the war, the heart of the conflict, and now that Palpatine has confessed, I feel very confused. It was disturbing information that changed the weight of decisions. Mace Windu narrowed his eyes at the revelation, while Yoda muttered softly, Dark, this is. Trusting the words of an enemy, dangerous can be. Calm yourself, young Skywalker. The Masters were considering leaving Anakin out of this mission, and, completely frustrated, he decided to leave dramatically. He left with heavy steps and a look of rage on his face. His hands were shaking. It wasn't just disappointment. It was frustration, lack of control. How can you leave me out of everything? He thought. In the hall, the Masters looked at each other in silence. He's not ready, commented one of the Masters. Mace Windu crossed his arms, his face hardened. That's exactly why we shouldn't trust him any longer. Palpatine must be arrested immediately, or executed. The discussion dragged on, the arguments multiplied. They didn't know it, but they wasted too much time. Time that Anakin used to make a dangerous decision. Anakin went after Palpatine alone. Guards tried to stop him, but he simply pushed them aside with the Force. No one dared to react against a Jedi. He climbed the steps of the tallest tower, breathing rapidly, his chest in agony. His visions haunted him, Padme dying in his arms, Palpatine's laughter echoing in his mind. He crossed the threshold of the former Chancellor's chambers. Palpatine stood in the center of the room, silent, his hands clasped behind his back. I knew you would come, he said calmly. The light from the tall windows cast strange shadows across his face. Please, Anakin began, his voice breaking. Tell me that everything you said was a lie. Please, I won't believe it." He was on the verge of tears, the saber trembling in his hand. Palpatine just turned slowly and walked over to one of the windows. "A lie? Oh no, my young friend. Every word was true. I am indeed a Sith, and it was I who planted the seeds of your visions. I am the pain you felt. I am the fear that led you here." Anakin staggered backward, as if the words had pushed him. "No, you used me. You used my mind." Palpatine laughed softly, a dry sound. "Used you? Perhaps. But you were a perfect instrument, a diamond forged in despair. And now it no longer matters. I have no further interest in wars, Anakin, nor in empires, not even in the Sith Order." Anakin shouted, "Are you saying you did all that? Killed, manipulated, deceived, and now you've simply given up?" Palpatine approached him, staring him in the eyes. "Yes, and I regret nothing, but I also don't care. You are stronger now, aren't you? Pain has shaped you." It was at that moment that Anakin's anger overcame him. In one swift motion, he activated his blue lightsaber and attacked. Palpatine responded with his own red lightsaber, which appeared almost magically in his hand. The two collided violently. The room vibrated with the sound of the lightsabers. Palpatine, older, moved with supernatural agility. Each blow he struck was precise, fatal. "Your hatred makes you predictable," said Palpatine, spinning in the air and firing energy bolts at Anakin, who fell. Objects in the room flew toward the young Jedi, thrown brutally by the Force. "You are not ready." With a cry of pain, Anakin saw his mechanical arm torn off by a direct blow from the former Chancellor. Fallen and bleeding, Anakin tried to reach his saber with the Force, but the pain was so great that he could no longer react after Palpatine himself used the Force to pin Anakin to the ground. Palpatine walked up to him calmly and knelt down. "Now you will see true power." He touched Anakin's forehead with his pale fingers and began a strange ritual, whispering ancient words. The room darkened for a moment and Anakin lost consciousness. But then the door burst open. Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Kit, and 2 other Jedi entered on high alert. What they saw made them act immediately. Anakin unconscious, missing an arm, and Palpatine chanting something over his body. "What are you doing to him?" Obi-Wan shouted, activating his lightsaber. Palpatine turned, his eyes glowing red. "I'm just freeing him from his chains." But the Masters did not hesitate. The 2 Jedi advanced first, and within seconds they were dead, defeated with shocking ease. Mace and Obi-Wan split up, flanking Palpatine. The fight was intense, devastating. Lightsabers clashed violently, windows shattered. Obi-Wan and Mace exchanged glances, increasingly pressured. "Now!" shouted Mace. In a synchronized movement, the 2 Masters leaped and delivered a combined blow. The sabers cut Palpatine's body in 2, diagonally, and what remained of the former Chancellor fell through the open window, plummeting from the top of the tower. There was silence, only the sound of the wind. Obi-Wan approached the window and murmured, "For a second, I swear I saw him smile." But there was no time to think about that now. They ran to Anakin. His body was weak, but alive. When Mace touched him, he felt something different. Obi-Wan supported his friend's head. "Anakin, can you hear me?" Slowly, the young man opened his eyes. The pain was evident, but something had changed. His mind seemed free, stable. Where is he?" he asked. Obi-Wan looked at Mace before answering. "He's gone. Forever." And Anakin, with a sorrowful sigh, closed his eyes again. But for the first time in a long time, he was at peace. Days later, Anakin was at Padme's side. Even with the loss of his arm, with the scars, he had survived. He was there, present. Padme cried with joy as she gave birth. Anakin held her hand tightly. The children were born healthy. Much was debated about what Palpatine had said before he died. The Jedi Order met in silence to decide on the next steps. But for now, there was peace. The galaxy, wounded, breathed again. And Anakin Skywalker, with tears in his eyes, looked at his children, and at the future that could still be saved.